Since the end of 2024, Jungle Rush has become the staple of Dreamworld's family attractions, bringing a well-themed, action-packed, and fun little family coaster to the park. It certainly fills a role that the park has needed a ride in for some time, at least since the removal of their water rides, which were the family staples of the park for decades. And the addition of a high-quality family coaster brings them into direct competition with Movie World, who have had a fan-favourite family attraction of their own since 2002. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is a Mark Wild Mouse with an attached dark ride section full to the brim with high-quality theming. It has formed theme park memories for millions of Australians over the course of its life. But who wins the showdown between the Gold Coast's two high-themed Australian family thrill coasters? Is it the quirky Vekoma prototype, or the bizarre custom-made Mark Wild Mouse? In today's video, it's a coaster showdown. Jungle Rush vs Scooby-Doo for the ultimate title of the best themed family coaster in Australia. This showdown will be decided over 7 categories, which are as follows. Coaster Forces discusses airtime, positives, laterals, and other forces to determine which coaster offers more for the thrill seeker. Layout discusses the ride's elements and overall layout, how well it's paced, how fluidly the elements string together, and overall how creative the design is. Comfort and Smoothness discusses the smoothness of the track and transitions, as well as the comfort of the restraint and seat design. Theming and Presentation compares the theming and storyline, as well as the aesthetic elements of the ride. Drops and Launches compares the ride based on their climactic moment, whether that's a first drop or an initial launch. Operations and Value for Queue Time discusses how efficiently the ride is operated and whether it offers good value for the time you spend in line. And finally, Significance and Impact talks about how well the coaster fits at the park and the legacy and reputation it has among park visitors and enthusiasts. So let's start off with round 1, Coaster Forces. Jungle Rush is the prototype of Vekoma's new switchback coaster model, opened in 2024. With a 460-metre layout, this family coaster model actually packs in quite a lot, bragging 12 individual airtime points. It's part of a breed of new generation coasters from Vekoma that are worlds apart from their previous work in terms of the quality of their layout and design. Where Vekoma's designs throughout the 1990s and 2000s were often clunky and poorly designed, their latest models are sleek, much improved versions that often have surprising force to them, even in the family coaster genre. Other examples of this surprising force are the suspended family coaster models such as TNT and Flight of the Wicked Witch, both of which have nice whippiness to them and an excellent first drop. In Jungle Rush's case specifically, there are a few great moments, including a lateral moment over the Murrissippi River that comes as a huge surprise, a very satisfying airtime hop on one of the drops off the turntable, and several moments that pick up some noticeable speed and G-force for a family coaster. While Jungle Rush is family friendly, it offers something for everyone, and it's not the type of family coaster that a thrill seeker is going to consider to be a one and done. It's an excellent product that manages to simultaneously have a wide target audience while not being boring. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is a customized Mark Rides Wild Mouse, opened in 2002, with a custom-designed pre-layout section that features a dark ride section and elevator lift. Where the coaster offers the vast majority of its thrills is in the Wild Mouse section, which is a standard Wild Mouse layout with an added backwards drop out of the elevator lift. It reaches a top speed of 45 km an hour. This drop is certainly an added thrill, and as a Wild Mouse coaster, the ride is certainly already a fast-paced and frenetic experience. Where Scooby shines forces-wise is the lateral forces of the Wild Mouse section, which are admittedly far stronger than anything Jungle Rush has to offer. The backwards drop is also a satisfying moment that certainly proves to be the most memorable part of the ride. Unlike Jungle Rush, however, Scooby's actual coaster layout is very generic and a frequently cloned model, simply with the dark ride and elevator lift sections added on at the beginning in place of what would usually be a standard chain lift. When it comes to predictability, Scooby is certainly the more conventional layout and its thrills are far more pre-packaged. While it is more formulaic in terms of its thrills and forces though, Scooby is the more powerful of the two rides. The Wild Mouse style of coaster is targeted at a slightly older demographic than Vekoma's family coaster models, certainly setting itself out as a thrill ride that accommodates families as opposed to a family coaster with a small dose of thrills. Round 1 is awarded to Scooby-Doo, giving it the first point of the showdown. Next, let's move on to round 2, the layouts. Jungle Rush marked the debut of the Vekoma Switchback Coaster, a new model which features a first-of-its-kind element referred to as an inclined swivel track. The ride ascends this swivel track, which is essentially an inclined section of track on a turntable which can alternate between 3 possible positions. This actually means that Dreamworld is capable of operating a variety of different combinations and cycles of the various loops of track that make up Jungle Rush's layout, and that each section of the track can be navigated either forwards or backwards depending on the direction of departure from the station and the ride's cycle. I myself have already experienced 2 different cycles depending upon whether the park is running 1 train or 2. The prototype layout has also been installed at VinWonders Vu Yen in Vietnam, with the first clone of Jungle Rush opening there in July 2025. The ride consists of an inner and outer loop of track, together totaling 460 meters. On a standard cycle, the ride will ascend the inclined swivel track twice, dropping first into the inner loop before ascending the swivel track again and being dropped into the outer loop. The inner loop is the milder of the 2 but offers nice pace, and in Jungle Rush's case specifically, the loop navigates the interior of the temple structure, which adds to the sense of speed with nearby props and the darkness of the temple. The outer loop offers the most forceful moments of the ride and navigates out further around Rivertown, interacting with Murrissippi Motors and the river. While the layout itself is no longer than any of Vekoma's traditional family coasters, the swivel track is the centerpiece of its success, giving the ride literally double the amount of variety thanks to the ability to ride in both directions. It's also worth noting that a 3rd switchback coaster is under construction, this one featuring a custom layout, at Mexico's upcoming Bon Luxury theme park. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster's layout is probably far more recognizable to coaster enthusiasts because it is one of the most cloned layouts in the world, obviously in Scooby's case specifically with some heavy modifications. Around 400 meters of the ride's 530 meters of track are a standard Mark Ride's Wild Mouse layout consisting of a series of hairpin turns followed by a series of steep drops. Where Scooby differs from a more standard Wild Mouse model is the addition of its pre-show section, as well as an elevator lift and turntable, giving the ride an additional large backwards drop out of the elevator lift. This lift is the highest point of the ride, standing at 17 meters tall, so it undeniably gives the Wild Mouse layout an additional element that proves to be one of the highlights of the ride. It's interesting that there is a strong parallel between these 2 coasters, being fairly standard models themselves that are largely centered around a unique lift mechanism that gives the ride more variety than its more generic counterparts. Without the elevator lift, Scooby would have lost this round absolutely resoundingly, as there is not much to be said for the creativity of a standard Wild Mouse layout. With that being said, while Scooby has a lot more to it than a standard layout, it is not this category that really benefits from those additions. The majority of the dark ride section is not actually a coaster per se, and rather consists of a tire-driven ride through a themed pre-show section, aside from a few small drops. Where Jungle Rush's swivel track gives a relatively simple layout a much more dynamic ride experience than it would have otherwise, when it comes to the layout of the coaster itself, Scooby is still ultimately just a Wild Mouse, other than the addition of 1 extra drop. One thing that I want to note is that both rides do suffer from flaws in their pacing as a result of their more technical added elements, but that Jungle Rush handles these interruptions much better as well. The theming around the swivel track serves to give the slow moments of the ride visual intrigue, while Scooby has struggled at times to maintain that during moments like the turntable, despite obvious efforts. I'm awarding round 2 to Jungle Rush. Its layout feels more refined and more creative than Scooby's, and I believe that the swivel track adds more to the ride experience on Jungle Rush than the elevator lift and turntable do for Scooby. The scores are level once again. As we move on to round 3, which is comfort and smoothness, now is a good time to mention that Scooby is currently undergoing a renovation for the 2nd time in its life, which will include some changes to the ride systems. While I decided that none of these changes are likely to be significant enough to change my opinions on which is better in any of these categories, it's worth noting that some of the information I present may be slightly outdated in a few months' time once those changes are in effect. Largely, those changes are quality of life upgrades to the ride systems that may slightly impact categories like comfort and smoothness, which could be improved overall. There are also likely changes to the theming, although as we'll discuss when we get to that round, I don't think those changes are going to change the round winner in any way. For now, let's talk about Scooby-Doo's comfort levels when it first opened. Firstly, from the perspective of the trains and restraints, Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster originally featured a very slightly modified version of the standard Mark Ride's Wild Mouse car. These cars seat 4 riders in a 2-across formation with a very basic ratcheting lap bar restraint. As far as I can tell from other models, these L-shaped lap bars came in 2 different variations, with the upright support either being on the inside or the outside of the footwell. In Scooby's case, they were on the inside of the footwell, so a good comparison is something like Goofy's Sky School at Animal Kingdom. That upright support could be a little bit of a problem. It tended to jam up the footwell space and smash against your legs a little, particularly for riders with long legs like mine. Also, the trains do have the common Wild Mouse issue of not being able to prevent riders from smashing into the sides of the car. Once again, new trains are a part of the upgrade, so there could be some minor changes to this arrangement, but Mark haven't built a new park model Wild Mouse since 2014, so whether it will be a heavily modified design is unclear at this stage. Mark's Wild Mouse cars are probably the most comfortable for a Wild Mouse manufacturer that I've experienced so far. I'm aware that they had some issues with earlier park models, but compared to Maura, which has a very uncomfortable rigid lap bar and hard seat with no ergonomic shaping, Mark's cars are far superior. The inherent design of the Wild Mouse means that lateral slamming is always going to be an issue, but in my experience of them so far, Mark do the best job of reducing the discomfort. As for the smoothness perspective, while the ride did roughen, Scooby has never been particularly rough. However, one aspect that did get uncomfortable was the brakes. The ride features a couple of mid-course moments, particularly at the end of the Wild Mouse section before returning to the station, where the brakes slam on the cars incredibly hard. Fortunately, this is another confirmed change with the ongoing renovation. Mark are replacing the friction brakes with magnetic ones, so this should become a much smoother and less violent braking motion. Overall, Scooby is fine in terms of comfort, but struggles with the typical charms of being a Wild Mouse. Obviously, when it comes to smoothness, Scooby is always going to struggle to compete with Jungle Rush. Not only is this a more fluid family coaster with none of the violent lateral moments of a Wild Mouse, but it's a brand new design by Vekoma, and their coasters over the last 5 years or so have become incredibly smooth, particularly their family coasters. Jungle Rush is only 10 months old, and it runs like absolute butter. Where Vekoma's family coaster designs are not quite so perfect is the train design. The modern Vekoma family coaster features a hydraulic T-bar design which does have a couple of flaws. First and foremost are these little serifs on the ends of the T-bar. This one on the outside is designed to be an easy handle for an operator to grab when conducting a lap bar check, while the one on the inside prevents riders from spreading their thighs in a way that could lower their waist and potentially allow for side-to-side movement. However, I don't think this quite accomplishes the goal. The serifs don't make contact with smaller riders, who would be the main concern for that kind of movement within the seat, and they only come into play for larger riders with thicker or longer thighs, who aren't really at risk of falling out of their seat in that way. As a result, the T-bars can be difficult for riders with larger thighs to lower properly, and can be very restrictive and uncomfortable on the thighs as well. Vekoma are moving ahead in leaps and bounds at the moment with their improved coaster designs, but the one area that I still think they're not quite getting it right is their restraint designs. Their STC and SFC lap bars are great, but their sit-down coasters just haven't quite got it right in my opinion yet. However, the saving grace with the family coasters is they don't feature any particularly violent forces that could make the restrictiveness of those lap bars truly painful. They're not the best, but it's a smooth and relatively moderate ride, so you're not going to get thrashed by them either. And I think that's the obvious difference. Even when Scooby reopens with those comfort and quality of life improvements, it's still going to be a Wild Mouse, and the inherent problem with that coaster design, as fun as they are, is that they revolve around sudden, violent changes of direction, and no amount of ergonomic design can prevent the ride from being occasionally painful. Jungle Rush not only takes advantage of being the more fluid ride, but it's also glass smooth, and aside from a less than perfect restraint design, it's pretty much perfect. The worst you'll experience on Jungle Rush is minor discomfort. I'm awarding the round to Jungle Rush, and it takes the lead. But it's got a big challenge on its hands in the next category. Round 4 is theming and presentation, a category which both of these rides perform very well. Both rides are quite extensively themed, perhaps the best themed rides at each of their respective parks. But which is the better of the two? Jungle Rush is part of Dreamworld's new Rivertown precinct, which is an intricately designed and beautiful new precinct at the park, which opened in late 2024. Alongside Jungle Rush, this precinct also features the Vintage Cars ride, Murrissippi Motors, and the themed dining experience, Jane's Rivertown Restaurant. The precinct is themed to a town constructed in the midst of a jungle by a pair of intrepid explorers. Jungle Rush specifically is based in a temple discovered by the explorers, which is said to have a mysterious curse. The ride's swivel track and station are set inside a fantastic temple-style building, which is probably the best ride building in Australia from an exterior design standpoint. It's utterly magnificent, with intricate theming and even water features cascading off the ride entrance. Inside, the queue is also elaborately themed with sculptures, lighting, water features, and various props from the explorers' efforts to uncover the mysteries of the temple. There are even some excellent Easter eggs hidden among the theming. Let me know if you've spotted any yourself in the comments below. Where Jungle Rush's theming falls slightly shorter is how the ride fits into this theme. While the concept and the execution from an aesthetic standpoint are excellent, it's entirely unclear what role the ride itself actually plays in the lore of this temple. Why are we here? What is happening to us on this ride? What are the stakes and the story? There really isn't much indication of any of that. Now, that's not to say Jungle Rush isn't well themed during the ride experience. The swivel track is accompanied by a very cool feature where a pair of gigantic suspended crystals move up and down along with the swiveling movement, implying some sort of booby trap style mechanism going on. The sound design is also fantastic. But there isn't much clarity on what is actually meant to be happening other than the vague idea that we are in some sort of ancient temple in the jungle. There are a lot of cases where I would say that Jungle Rush is aesthetically superior to Scooby-Doo. The exterior facade is a major improvement. I would say the queue is more detailed and better designed, and certain theming elements such as those crystals are probably more impressive than anything on Scooby. But where Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster outshines Jungle Rush is the far more immersive narrative style. Where Jungle Rush uses its theming to imply its story, which makes it unclear to the uninformed rider, Scooby is a truly themed experience in the sense that its theming elements are used to tell the story in a much clearer and more explicit way. While we do have to disclose that there are anticipated changes to the theming, both previous iterations of the ride's Dark Ride section have used animatronics and special effects to clearly demonstrate that we're in a spooky castle attempting to escape a number of spooky monsters that are pursuing us and Scooby. Scooby's theming was at its strongest in the original version, when the pre-show relied mostly on animatronics and physical props. This actually made it one of the strongest haunted houses I've been on, as well as a great family coaster. The animatronics were reasonably smooth and realistic for the basic movements they were designed for, which was usually just lurking out of the darkness towards the riders. The next generation upgrade saw some of these more physical and practical effects replaced by projection mapping screens, which were definitely less effective. Not only were the effects prone to working incorrectly, but they looked corny and certainly broke the immersion somewhat. I suppose that a second criticism of Scooby's theming could be that it essentially ends after the elevator lift, with the Wild Mouse section of the layout being just in a big black box for all intents and purposes. However, I certainly think that the difference between the two rides comes down to the level of detail within the ride experience itself. Jungle Rush's queue is actually superior, and I think that from the outside, Jungle Rush is the better ride, aesthetically speaking. But its theming on-ride is far more implicit and falls short of the mark sometimes, while Scooby is incredibly detailed, mostly in the first section. The scores are level once again, as I'm awarding this category narrowly to Scooby-Doo. This really is neck and neck. Round 5 is all about drops and launches, the definitive moments of most roller coasters. For the purposes of this comparison, we are comparing the drop off the swivel track, both forwards and backwards for Jungle Rush, against the backwards drop out of the elevator lift for Scooby-Doo. Jungle Rush's swivel track is a fantastic and innovative element. It takes the design of the One Direction lift hill from the Vekoma family boomerang model and adds the swiveling feature, giving it an added element of suspense and the extra variety of being able to drop into separate tracks. Where it struggles in this comparison is its shallow angle. One of the tracks does feature an additional dip, which provides a nice little pop of airtime in the back seats facing forward or the front seats facing backward. But much like the family boomerangs, the drop itself is fairly mild and a slow accumulation of speed down the straight, shallow-angled swivel track. However, the feature that does give Jungle Rush some points in this argument is the variety provided by the ability to take each track in both directions. This is a drop that can be experienced in a variety of different ways, depending both upon your direction and your seat, giving the ride great re-rideability. Whichever direction you choose, I recommend heading towards the back row in the direction of travel, as this will give you a nice pop of floater airtime on the drop into the inner loop, as there is a slightly steeper dip off the swivel track on that particular section. When compared to Scooby-Doo though, the technical limitations of the swivel track as a first drop become much clearer. Scooby's first drop is not typical of a Wild Mouse coaster, but is an added feature as part of the custom layout. It's a 17-meter tall backwards drop directly out of the elevator lift. This is a moment of the ride that typically catches riders off guard. While it's not huge, it is significantly steeper than Jungle Rush's swivel track, and certainly more intense. While it doesn't have the same variety and re-rideability as Jungle Rush is, with fewer rows and the ride only operating in one direction, I don't think there's much of a competition in terms of which drop is superior. Scooby's backwards drop is a highlight of the ride. My only criticism would be that it leads directly into the turntable, which immediately stops the momentum of the ride, but the drop itself is quite good. It's a great addition to the coaster that differentiates it from a standard Wild Mouse and really gives the ride an extra moment of thrills. I'm undoubtedly giving this section to Scooby-Doo, giving it the lead in this seesaw contest. With 2 rounds to go, it's advantage Movie World. Before we move on to the next round, a big thank you to the Keith Monorail Army for their support. We are the best roller coaster army on the internet, fighting for the truth that the Keith Monorail is the greatest coaster of all time. Click the join button below to become a part of the army, and a special thank you to Generals Scaretastic YT and Rowan McMaster. Our penultimate round is operations and value for queue time. In this round, we'll talk about which ride is operated to its best potential and manages to keep its queues to an acceptable level to make sure the ride is worth waiting for. To begin with Jungle Rush, I have seen this ride operate on both 2-train and 1-train operation modes, and there is an interesting factor worth considering that gives the ride some additional value when operations are slower. While 1-train ops is obviously much slower, the 1-train ride cycle completes an additional lap of the inner loop of the layout. This is to ensure that the train returns to the station facing in the opposite direction to the way it departed, which means that the choice between riding forwards first or backwards first is still available, even when only 1 train is on the track. This does help to add some extra value to the ride when operations are moving slower, and typically this is only done during off-peak periods when queues are shorter anyway. For the majority of the time though, Jungle Rush's operations are fairly respectable and certainly superior to most other family coasters due to the possibility to operate with 2 trains. Dreamworld's loading procedures are quite good, and usually the queue moves fairly swiftly. The longest queue I've seen for the ride was 60 minutes for Dreamworld After Dark when the ride first opened. However, in my few visits, the ride has been prone to stacking the second train on the final breaks, which is an indicator of slow operations. I put this down to operators still familiarizing themselves with a new ride at the time, as the dispatch times were fairly inconsistent. Sometimes they were fast, sometimes very much not so. The design of the station is a little flawed and sabotages efficiency somewhat. The loose item storage boxes are located towards the middle of the train, and the exit side platform is very narrow. This causes problems as riders walk into each other and cause congestion when trying to grab or leave behind their loose items. All in all, however, Jungle Rush's queue is typically quite manageable and moves in an acceptable pace. The separation of the queues at the end does give a bit of a frustrating illusion of slowness, as the line only moves once every 2 cycles once the directions are being alternated, but this is not the fault of the ride. This category is also where Jungle Rush's detailed themed queue comes in handy. While some rooms are more detailed than others, the queue is indoor, cool and pleasant, and offers plenty to look at to pass the time. Overall, while it is already proving a popular family ride, Jungle Rush most often proves worth the wait. And with the addition of a single rider line, it's a queue that's effectively managed as well. It's no secret that Movie World have become far less effective than Dreamworld in terms of operations and queue time management. But despite its low capacity per ride vehicle, Scooby-Doo was never actually the most notorious of the rides at the park in terms of operations. That being said, it did suffer from terribly long queue times, largely due to popularity more than anything else. With only 4 riders per car, Scooby does have to maintain quite a steady operating pace in order to keep the queue moving, and a line can very quickly amass. It is, when it is operating, Movie World's most popular family attraction, and the demand simply can't be kept up with by only dispatching 4 riders at a time. Like Jungle Rush, Scooby's queue is also indoors to make that wait more bearable, but the theming is certainly more reduced, particularly in the large cattle pen of the main queue area, where the only theming elements to provide a distraction are the central fountain and the projection screens, which play a behind-the-scenes mini-documentary from the production of the Scooby-Doo live-action film. On the really busy peak days, you can sometimes see that video multiple times on loop, so it doesn't really provide a complete distraction from the boredom. In terms of the operations themselves though, Scooby is a little more streamlined than Jungle Rush, with separate load and unload stations, and a policy of allowing guests to take their bags onto the ride to prevent the congestion issues caused by offloading and storing loose items. The station itself is certainly designed better to handle the traffic flow. But I don't think I can give this point to anyone but Jungle Rush. It's a more efficient ride with higher throughput, and a more immersively themed queue to handle those longer lines. One thing that I think could be implemented at Scooby-Doo that has nothing to do with the ride model is the use of single rider lines. This encourages solo guests to step out of the main queue and prevents cars from being dispatched with empty seats. It's just a more efficient way of doing things. So after 6 rounds, the scores are tied at 3 apiece, making our final round the decider between these 2 amazing family coasters. So it all comes down to this. The final round is significance and impact. This will explore how important the coaster is to the park, how well it serves its purpose at the park, and the impact it has had on the park's influence as well. Jungle Rush, of course, sets out here at a disadvantage, being significantly newer. It has had nowhere near the time to gain the same reputation. But in terms of its impact within Dreamworld, I actually have a lot of positive things to say about Jungle Rush's significance. Rivertown in general was a large investment that has come at a time where Dreamworld is rebuilding its image and essentially reinventing the entire park one stage at a time. There's a lot of pressure on each of those investments to inspire new confidence in the park and to encourage guests who might have been turned off Dreamworld to reconsider visiting. Jungle Rush and Rivertown in general have certainly been the best investment they've made so far in that regard. While Steel Taipan is a great coaster, Sky Voyager is a brilliant attraction as well, and the refurbishment of Kenny and Belinda's Dreamland was welcome, Rivertown was a big step towards a new kind of Dreamworld with a renewed focus on immersive design and theming. It was exciting to see a new precinct come to the Gold Coast with intricate design and a lot of attention to detail, and crowning that land with the first of its kind Vekoma family coaster with very respectable theming was a nice touch. I think it's not a huge stretch to say that in the future, Jungle Rush will be seen as a very significant attraction for Dreamworld and possibly one of the defining rides of this new era at the park. Thinking about it from more than just a historical perspective though, I think Jungle Rush is an excellent family attraction for the park and actually one of the pivotal rides in the park's lineup. It's an attraction that intrigues every member of the family and serves as one of the rides that a family group will probably ride together. It also offers a more unique and detailed experience than Kenny's Forest Flyer, for example, which might not be that interesting to those who come to theme parks for more experiences than just rides. Ultimately, it's a great ride, but I think it's hard to compare the reputation and impact of these two rides when we look beyond their roles within their respective parks. Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster is undeniably, uncontroversially, one of Australia's most famous roller coasters. It is featured in pop culture. Its impact has been far-reaching. I dare say that it is a formative memory for many adults today who grew up going to theme parks or even who made a one-time trip to the Gold Coast. I can certainly remember it as one of the first big roller coasters I ever rode. Part of that legacy is, of course, due to its links to a recognizable property like Scooby-Doo, but also due to its immersive theming, making it a memorable ride that stands out in the memory far more than a simple roller coaster would. As far as roller coasters having an impact on generations, I think Scooby-Doo has been one of the most influential roller coasters in Australia in the 21st century. It's a landmark of our theme park landscape. And within the park, it serves a vital purpose as well. I think that purpose is best demonstrated at a time like now when it's out of action. Movie World's offerings for families are slightly shallower than they may appear on the outside. Wizard of Oz and Roadrunner are basic family coaster clones, so really only Wild West Falls and Justice League step in to fill the gap of the immersive family thrill experience. When the three are together, they're a pretty powerful trifecta of coaster, flume ride, and dark ride. But without Scooby in action, it can feel like the park is missing a keystone attraction in between the kiddie rides and the thrill rides. I don't think there's any competition on which coaster is more influential, both in terms of its impact on the Australian coastal landscape and for the vital role and popularity it demonstrates at the park. Round 7 goes to Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster, which is our winner by 4 points to 3. Congratulations to Movie World. You are the proud owners of Australia's best themed family coaster. Let me know which coasters you'd like to see battle against each other in the next Coaster Showdown video. Before we go, I want to give a shout out to a commenter at Dean4793 on YouTube. Dean said they had a massive flashback when I mentioned the vibrating floor in the Cyclone queue, and they would love to know if there's any footage of it. Thanks for your comment, Dean. I haven't been able to find any footage of the vibrating floor myself, but if anyone out there has some, it would be amazing to see it. By the time I rode Cyclone for the first time, most of those effects were no longer in operation, so tragically, I never got the chance to get footage either. You can still see some of the remnants of the effects though. The shaking tunnel is still there, just with the mechanism removed or turned off, so keep an eye out the next time you ride Gold Coaster. Thank you so much for watching and for being a supporter of my channel. If you'd like to be featured in my next video, you can leave a comment, send a message in my Discord, linked in the description, or you can send me something in the mail. My PO box details are on the screen now. For now, this is Maloney's Coasters from the Spooky Island, reminding you to be kind to one another, have a lovely day, and keep gaining credits. Bye.